welcome to the Lemonade Car Show. I'm your host, Lorraine Sommerfeld. Tonight we're going to be talking about all things insurance. Lemonade is brought to you by OMVIC, and we're produced by the Automobile Protection Association. Joining me tonight is George Iny. He's the president of the APA, and Debbie Arnold. She's with Sound Insurance. Debbie, one of my favorite shows is when you're here because insurance is awful.
Yes, it is.
It's terrible.
It is.
It's worst in Ontario, and we're in Ontario right now.
We are.
Okay, let's just get to it. Why are our rates so high?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Okay, 30 seconds. Why are rates so high?
Our rates are high because the system is overtaxed and abused, and personal injury lawyers are making way too much money.
Okay, that's fair.
So, in April, a report came out from David Marshall, who was the former CEO of WSIB. And the report is, it was examining the entire system in Ontario as compared to the rest of Canada.
Which we're going to get to in a second.
Which we'll get to in a second. And what he found and what he's looking for are recommendations, and it should be more of a care instead of cash system, which would be a good thing. Our system is abused. We have personal injury lawyers putting forth lawsuits that are frivolous. Scratch on the bumper is $1.5 million. I'm sorry. I don't know how you sustain $1.5 million in injury from a scratch on your bumper. These things are happening. That's driving up claims costs. The claims cost in Ontario are 100% higher than the rest of the country, but our premiums are only 55% higher. So the math doesn't work. The system needs to be not rehashed, it needs to be working properly.
Okay, so what do we say then? I'm going to bring George in now. I get a lot of readers and viewers who will say to me, why can't I do it like my dad in Saskatchewan or my uncle in Quebec or somebody in BC?
Auto.
Yeah, public versus private.
Well, I would say the provinces with public auto insurance have mostly avoided the wild swings. Like even when they're expensive, they have a lot more stability. And generally speaking, your premium doesn't go crazy when you have, like, let's say, a few tickets or a couple of claims. So there is definitely a perception that you have more security in a public auto insurance
But
province.
you don't have the benefits. BC is kind of a mix of private
That's right.
and public because
And Quebec also,
and
really.
Quebec, well, Quebec
Because
is
Quebec,
more
your car is run
is
by the
private.
private insurance.
same as BC.
And
yeah.
liability, though, is 100% a public, and you can't claim from the other driver in Quebec at all.
Which to me poses a problem.
Well,
Because you're in Quebec, you have a set schedule of what you can be paid in terms of an injury. There's no taking into account potential future earnings. At least you have the opportunity in Ontario to gain some of that back. And to me, that's a problem with the Quebec system. And yes, the premiums are lower, but you're getting much, much less than what you do in Ontario. In BC, this system, they're looking at a 30% increase. They're the second highest premiums in Canada. The ICBC is sued constantly, and they're in huge problems right now because they're looking at rising claims costs and a 30 to 40% increase over the next year. Our increase is only 1%.
Only. I like that.
But our
a lot
increase
of people
in
are
that
reporting that when they get there, and particularly if you're in Southern
Exactly.
Ontario, people will tell you, well, my increase isn't 1%, it's much more.
And that's very true because the overall, and this is what people have to be very careful of when they're reading things, stories in the newspaper and in media, an overall increase of 1% means the urban areas is going up 10, the rural areas, Northern Ontario, might go down 9. So you have to be very careful how you look at the information that's presented.
There's another problem I think that has happened here is as soon as you call something no fault, which we do, people get to say, it's not my fault anymore.
Exactly.
And we've just removed this whole part of the people, it's their fault when something happens. They're going, it's no fault. It's like no fault divorce, even though divorce really isn't anyone's fault, but that's a whole nother story. I really think the wording sometimes is misleading.
I've always said that it's a misnomer to name it no fault. And when I explain it to my clients, there's no fault. They say to me, it's no fault insurance. No fault is a misnomer.
There is
All
fault.
it means is that no matter whose fault, your insurance company is paying for your damage.
You'll still be assessed fault.
Exactly.
But all that money wasted suing the other insurance companies, and in the end of the year, they all more or less level out, is theoretically available to put back in the system.
Exactly, and that was the whole idea of going to the no-fault system, and it is a good system. Our product in Ontario is an excellent product. The product doesn't need to be changed. The delivery of the product needs to be changed. the delivery of the benefits when you're injured in an accident needs to be changed.
What would you
You know.
say? Like, what are some of the abuses you think that are
think-
driving up costs?
The personal injury lawyers putting forth frivolous lawsuits, I think, is a massive cost to the industry, because when an insurance company receives that lawsuit, they have to defend it. You know, and when they're looking at it, regardless of it's that one little scratch and it's 1.5 million, it's much more economic for them to throw $25,000 at it to make it go away
That
than
keeps
to
it
take
going.
it to court and pay $250,000.
So this is getting into all the discussion about fraud, which we saw the
Exactly.
Ontario government bring forward saying we're going to clamp down on it, from tow trucks to
But they didn't do anything about the
aftercare.
lawyers.
Well, they didn't do it. Okay.
And that's a problem. Now, what David Marshall was saying in his report is that the legal fees need to be much
They
more
have to be kept?
transparent.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when there is a large catastrophic loss, 25% of the payout is not going to the
Not
insured.
going to. Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk more about the fraud, the Lemonade Car Show. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show. I'm Lorraine Sommerfeld. I'm joined by George Iny, the president of the APA, and Debbie Arnold with Sound Insurance. We're starting to talk about fraud. I want to talk about fraud because I don't know if this is a question of fraud or not, but it's a question that comes up frequently. Is it worth contesting tickets? If I don't tell an insurance company about a ticket, are they going to find it? What are the chances? And if I contest it, does that make more noise around it, or does it make it go away? So what would you tell us? It's a popular question because everyone speeds.
I tell my clients always contest your tickets. And the reason I tell them that is because it's the fastest way to increase your premium. Insurance companies will charge for tickets. If you don't have any tickets and you have one, it's going up by 10%. Some companies are now offering minor conviction protection for $30, $40 a year. So if you do get the one, it's like a forgiveness of an accident. It's the same thing, forgiveness for a ticket. So it's a good buy. But I believe in contesting your tickets because the more you have, the more your rates are going to go up. Will it disappear? Will the insurance company not know about it? That depends on the insurance company. Some companies will pull a driving record every single year.
Who?
I'll give you a list later. Other companies will do random pulls. They'll take just a segment for that month's renewals and pull the driving records, and it'll be a 1 year because that's cost effective, and if they see a ticket, they'll charge for it. I don't like to see
If you're
tickets.
changing insurers, correct?
If you're changing insurers, definitely. Definitely, if you're going
this
to a
was
new
tough.
carrier, you're going to know. It's very tough as a broker because I'll look at, somebody will send me a copy of their renewal and they want me to quote them new business. There's no
an
tickets
abstract,
there, but I
yeah.
pull their driving record and they have two. Well, we're not going to be competitive. So if you are shopping, make sure that you're very honest with the new broker or agent you're going through and understand, take a look at your policy, see what the rating is. If you don't have any tickets on that policy, but you know you have two, don't shop it.
Don't shop it.
It's not worth it.
How long does a ticket hang on your record?
3 years.
3 years?
Now,
Asking for a friend?
be, be careful because a lot of people think it goes by the offense date. It doesn't, it goes by the conviction date. So that's going to push your ticket. They'll say, oh, it's off, it was 3 years ago. No, you got the ticket in
Contested it like
December.
Debbie told you to. for 9
Exactly. And then
months.
it goes on your record 8 months later. It goes by that that later date.
Good information.
So, and that's on for 3 years.
And I don't have a speeding ticket. I'm just like joking around here. When I go to renew, it's really tempting not to read all the fine print, but just like a new car contract and everything else, there's a lot of fine print, and it matters now. We've got changes that have taken place about a year and a half ago now, I believe,
Yeah, June 2016.
which people should be
This is for
reading.
Ontario.
Sorry, for Ontario to up their rates, to up the coverages because it was less coverage for more money. What's going on in the future? What are we going to be seeing?
Well, hopefully a lot of the recommendations from David Marshall are adopted, and the system will work a little bit more fluidly, and people will be getting their benefits a lot quicker. I think it's really important when people are looking at their benefit package on the accident, and it just amazes me. This has been out for a year and a half, and I have the conversation with new clients on a daily basis, and they haven't looked at it. I encourage and I quote, every time I do a quote, I increase it to the maximum, at least for medical, rehab, and attendant care coverage. Income replacement can be upped from 400 to 1,000. Medical rehab attendant care can be increased up to $1 million, et cetera, et cetera. And that's an in-depth conversation you should be having with your agent or broker. If you're a clean driver, $100 a year. Just as important, $2 million liability. Everybody needs to carry at least $2 million liability. I have a lawsuit for a bumper scratch for $1.5 million.
Now, the APA website, you've got information on insurance on there too. Like you cover everything and you help members looking for the right kind of insurance.
This is who helps them.
This is
members.
who helps
You're
I'm
kind
saying
of
is in
there
one
if you're
spot,
here.
They can go and find.
There is information on it, but it's a lot of this is very specific to the individual. So generic info that you might find on a site is not going to necessarily ask all the questions. Same with those online quotes, right?
Exactly. 99% of them are wrong. Online quoting asks this many questions to do kind of a basic, give you sort of an idea. We need this much information in order to actually create an accurate quote. So online quoting systems, in fact, my clients will say, oh, I got a quote from this online tool and it's $86 a month. He's paying $200 with me. There's a reason he's paying $200 a month with me.
It's also an unreliable narrator. You're self-reporting when you fill those out.
Exactly,
and you're giving them
exactly. And the information may not seem that important to you. It is to the rating engine, you know.
Yeah.
And when premiums are driven up, and they're driven up by accidents, they're driven up by tickets. I had my second highest quote in 30 years 2 weeks ago for $24,000 a year for a single vehicle.
For a boat or for a car?
No, it was a car.
What kind
it
of
was
car?
for a nothing car. He was 22
There
with
it is.
2 accidents, a failed to remain, and a careless. I told him to Uber or take transit for a year. The price will be half in
It's
a
really
year.
possible to have like a cheap car with a $24,000.
Absolutely.
He'll
This
drive
was
for
liability
Uber.
only. This
Are you
wasn't
kidding
even
me?
with collision on it. Yeah.
That's the kind of kid that ends up driving for Uber, not taking Uber.
He won't be insured. And a thing about Uber, there are more companies coming to the table that will accept Uber use because Uber is insured by Intact on the commercial side once the site is activated. So, but you do have to notify your personal insurance carrier.
Yeah.
Make sure they accept it. Not all companies will write an Uber driver on the personal side.
We'll be right back after this break. Lemonade Car Show. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by OMVIC. We're talking about insurance. Welcome back, Debbie Arnold with Sound Insurance and George Iny, the president of the APA. As we went to break, we brought up the Uber word, my favorite 4-letter word. I'm going to relax, okay? Hey, I made good money fighting about Uber the last 2 years. But
Debbie, what is the situation now with insurance for Uber drivers if we look at Ontario? So how does it work?
Well, in Ontario, the Uber drivers are covered by Intact. They have a commercial policy, so as soon as the Uber driver accesses the Uber app, they're covered by Intact. So their personal insurance is not in the picture at all during the use of the app until they pick up the client, they drop them off, and the app is turned off.
so they don't have to call
Technically.
Intact and get a policy with them.
No.
Okay.
No. If they're with Intact on their personal vehicle, it's just a note on the file. But that you do have to disclose that you're using the vehicle for Uber. Any usage change is a material change in risk to any insurance company.
So if you're with Allstate, you have to say,
You have to say, I'm driving for Uber.
even
whether
though Intact
U-
covers it.
That's right.
Okay.
Allstate may not accept that. And the reason they're not accepting that is because the Uber usage has not been tested in court yet. So there's a lot of companies that are fearful that when it does go to court, they're going to be on the hook for the Uber use, and that is not something they would normally write.
your
So
best
it's a
bet is
problem.
to shift your insurance to Intact, all of it.
You could, but it could be cost prohibitive if you did that, because Intact may be very high in your area.
But if you're with Ulster Cooperators and they don't
And
acknowledge.
they don't acknowledge it exactly, but there are other companies that do.
Oh, that might. So just ask.
So one company has just announced this week that they're willing to accept the Uber use as long as it's noted on the file. And I can't stress enough, non-disclosure is a big deal. You need to have a conversation with your agent or broker. I mean, I know from Ontario that Intact is covering it. For the other provinces, I don't. You need to have a conversation with the agent or broker and find out if your current insurer is covering it. If not, can you move to another insurer that isn't, thousands of dollars more?
So how are passengers in an Uber vehicle covered? Like, how does that work?
In Ontario, if they're injured in an accident and they have their own auto policy, their accident benefits are paid under that policy.
You claim on your own insurance, even if
For,
you're in
for
someone
any,
else's car?
that's right. For any injury, you would claim under your own.
It's like that no-fault thing.
That's what it is. Now, if you don't have your own auto insurance, but you live in a household where mom or dad has auto insurance, it's going to be paid out of there. If you have access, or rather if you have no access whatsoever to an automobile policy, then the Uber vehicle is going to pay for it.
Oh.
So it does get very convoluted. And the one thing I should mention, under that Intact commercial policy, when you're driving for Uber, it is set coverage. You have $1 million liability, you have standard accident benefits, you have a $1,000 deductible. If you've increased your coverage on your personal vehicle, let's say for your medical rehab attendant care, or you have $2 million liability, it's not going to extend to your Intact policy, the Intact coverage for Uber.
And let me ask you something, because this is what happens. Let's say I'm with a company, it doesn't matter, XYZ insurance company, and I call them and say, I'm going to drive for Uber, Intact will cover me for the Uber part. That company says, we don't accept that.
Right.
Now we know you can drive for Uber, we're turfing you.
Yeah, and they could terminate.
Okay.
Because it's a material change in risk.
So is this why if I have a broker, I can call and ask them and they don't
Exactly.
necessarily, they're not going to break up with me because they're not going to
Exactly.
know. Okay, so that's a good reason to have a broker in there.
If you have, if you're, I'm biased, I'm a broker.
Yeah, I know.
But an agent, if you pose the question, I'm thinking of doing this.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this,
Yeah.
but I'm thinking of it.
So my friend,
And that's how you would pose it. Or
Yeah.
you could call any agent broker, the Insurance Bureau of Canada, IBAO. There's a lot of resources out there
IBC
to
has a
ask your
good
questions.
website. There's a
Yeah.
lot of good
There's a lot of
FAQs on there, a
information
lot
on
of
there.
information. There's also a squeal line on the ICB site, which I really like. People realize when we're talking about fraud and investigations and stuff, they have investigators. And it's not just in bad movies where people are watching to see if the guy can lift up the heavy,
Exactly.
recycling bins and stuff. They're paying attention. And I find that the angriest people could be an ex-spouse or neighbors that don't like you. And if you're housing your vehicle somewhere, like you're insuring it, we talked about this
Yes,
earlier yesterday, I was
exactly.
writing about this for next week. And it's like, my car's in Parry Sound. No, it's not. You live down here in Toronto. You'd be surprised at who will rat you out and who will squeal.
Well,
by you.
actually, insurance companies aren't as dumb as what they may seem sometimes, because sometimes they'll ask if somebody's using a Toronto broker, and you have a client in Parry Sound, they may ask to see a utility bill. Actually, I might ask to see your utility bill.
Most of the work we're doing is in Ontario here and across the country. There are changes. There are things that are different. The IBC site, Insurance Bureau of Canada, does cover all of Canada, so it's a good place to go for information.
Except for public auto.
Except for
Yeah, the public stuff is, and people have often said that change to public auto insurance in Ontario, I don't think it would work well.
I know you're not a fan. Thanks,
No.
Debbie Arnold. It's been great having you on the show. Lemonade Car Show will return after this break. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by Automotive. I'm joined now by Chris Muir, our mechanic, and George Iny rejoins us, APA president and professor. I'm in stellar company. Chris, we're going to jump in right to a caller's question.
All right, then.
I think it's a good one.
I think so.
Hello, my name is Bruce. I'm calling from Toronto. I have an emissions question. I have a 1988, that's 88, Porsche 928, and I haven't driven it for a few years. I want to put it back on the road. I'm wondering, what are the rules now for e-test regarding that? It used to be I had to drive on with the machine, but I don't think those machines exist anymore, and the car's not OBD2, so I'm just curious, what do I do about getting an e-test for that? Thank you very much.
OBD is onboard diagnostic.
It is onboard
First of all, do you
diagnostic.
have to get a 1988 car? like 30
Absolutely
years
you
old?
do, yep.
There's no,
every-
after a certain number of years? there's
No, sir, they stopped that moving forward program with your 20 or 30-year window that it was. Now it's everything 87 and earlier is exempt. Everything 88 and later needs to be tested biannually for passenger cars. There is a two-speed idle. You have to phone around and find a facility that offers a two-speed idle test for an older vehicle.
Is it easy to pass?
It depends on
There's no
how
rollers.
it depends on how the vehicle is set up and how it's tested. It depends on the carbon emissions and the NOx emissions from the vehicle as they're testing it. So if it's running pig rich, it won't pass. If the catalyst isn't working efficiently, it won't pass.
What about fuel vapors? Do they test for that? Like
They
tank?
test gas cap, but they don't actually test tank pressure. No.
What are the chances he's going to get this e-tested?
On
Realistically.
particular models, it's a little bit dicey as to whether or not they're going to
I
pass.
remember Jaguars were bad.
Jaguars were bad. This particular Porsche, from what
Some
our
years are
Porsche
Volvo.
enthusiasts around here were saying, is bad as well. But he's got a pretty good likelihood that this thing will pass, especially if he gets his little temporary and runs it around, make sure that he's got nice fresh fuel, something the thing can burn, or just a regular gasoline in
So
the car.
find a garage that specializes in this and can still do it, and
Yeah.
then start the process of,
Getting
Yeah,
it
getting it
up and
done.
running again.
okay. We're going to move on to a few questions that have been mailed in.
Ooh,
Oh, yeah.
we go to the mailbag.
I'm buying a 2012 Chevy Equinox. They've been on the internet. They found out there's some problems. Are there problems with that Equinox? Let's start with George. What do you think of the 12 Equinox?
Average. So the V6, which is a pretty rare engine for that model, it's a 3.6. We've
The
talked
V6,
about.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a problem engine. I'll let you take over.
The 3.6 VVT, particularly the early ones, had a few chain and oil consumption issues with the engines themselves. They're not one of my favorites. I've been told in later model years they've fixed the problems, and I haven't seen the evidence of that myself. But 2012, it's not one that I'd get into. The Ecotec isn't a horrible engine with that. As far as anything else, they're pretty typical GM fare. You're going to go through brakes and wheel bearings.
Engine service lights.
Some engine service lights, yeah, but typically they're not as cost prohibitive to fix as some other makes. So
It's GM quality, from what we're seeing, and complaints began to go down in 2012. So that's like a transition year.
Well, the quality or the complaints?
Sorry, excuse me. The quality went up. The complaints began to go down at that
okay,
point.
good.
So they began slowly to
They're
correct problems that really they had lived with for a decade in some cases.
absolutely.
And certainly by 2015, most of the GM product was significantly
So they're
better.
turning a corner.
So I'd say the advantage of the Equinox, it's large, like inside, and it's not expensive for what it is. So have it checked, and if it looks good, it's probably a reasonably safe purchase. It's preferably maybe with the 4, even though the performance is lower.
Okay, we've got a couple minutes to the end of the show, so I'm going to throw this at you. The engine light's on.
The engine
A
lights
lot
on.
of people driving around with the engine light on.
Don't do that.
First, what could it be? 1,000 things.
It could be any number of
Well,
things.
Is it a yellow light or a red light? So we have to.
Engine lights are always only yellow. If it's flashing, it's a problem. You need to shut off the vehicle and get it towed to wherever
So
you go.
flashing is the equivalent of a red?
Flashing is catalyst damaging misfire. So
Okay.
you've got something going
Money.
on, right?
Okay.
If the car drives normally, drive it into your service station, get it checked out. If something else goes wrong inside of those systems that monitor evaporative emissions, you're not going to know the next one that fails if one's failed and tripped the
Because
light
they hide
already.
behind the light. Like
That's
they,
right.
And they stack up.
They can stack. And your first one that was a $50 part now has a $50 part and the $200 part and the $3,000 part right behind it.
So they're hiding each
because you ignored it for 2 years and now the car is sitting in the driveway. It doesn't run and it's a piece of junk because you didn't fix it.
And it could be that your gas cap's not tight enough.
It could have been.
So don't be scared to go and ask.
Absolutely. And ask someone you trust. Get that good relationship with your mechanic.
And you get that good relationship by not just showing up when your engine light's on. Get it in twice a year, get your oil changes done, get your tire rotation. Go there when it's...
I would actually follow the schedule in the owner's manual with
Yeah.
the possible exception of oil changes, which some manufacturers have stretched out a little bit too long, rather than just going to the counter and saying, I just want an oil change.
Well,
It should really, no, because it's a lot of what happens. There's a lot of improv at the counter. The people on the other side also you don't realize might be getting a commission. So that's why they're telling you need an oil treatment and a fuel injector flush. But then important things that should be checked under the vehicle are overlooked. So the ideal is take the menu with you that the vehicle comes with. It's a good start if you're not technical.
good to build that rapport with the mechanic. It's in
Absolutely.
twice a year for the tire change anyway, and I know they know they're going to look. And I also, when they tell me it needs this, I go, okay, because I trust them and they trust me. They'll also do a lot of stuff for free. I show up, they go, oh, it's just this, don't worry about it, go. And I'm like, really? It's great.
Old school.
So, it is old school. And they're not even that old. They're my age, so they're young. Okay, maybe that's my-
Our sense is that technicians have, the least agency in the repair business of all the other people. The service managers are telling them
Service
what to
managers,
do.
big deal.
The interface with the client has to go through a service advisor who's commission-based.
A topic I'm sure we're going to come back to over and over again on this show. Thanks for joining us tonight on the Lemonade Car Show. I'd like to thank my guests, Debbie Arnold, Chris Muir, and George Iny. Lemonade Car Show is brought to you by ONVIC, Ontario's Motor Vehicle Industry Council, and Crown Rust Proofing. Good night, everybody.